Thank you. Good evening. I'm John Frisbee, President of the U.S.-China Business Council. On behalf of all the co-hosts of tonight's event, I want to express my thanks to all of you for being here this evening. I particularly want to express our thanks for our sponsors tonight for making this event happen. You'll see their names on the program. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce to you the Chair of the U.S.-China Business Council, the Chair and CEO of DuPont Company, Ellen Kullman.
Thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. The U.S.-China Business Council is absolutely delighted to host tonight's dinner with our counterpart, the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, together with many other organizations joining us here this evening. The U.S.-China Business Council celebrated its 40th anniversary this year, and we are very proud of the 4 decades of work aimed at building a constructive relationship between the United States and China. During that time, the relationship between the United States and China has taken many positive and historic strides forward. That progress continues as our governments of both countries support consistent, high-level engagement and invite cooperation by non-governmental and corporate sectors. There's no better example of that than the strategic and economic dialogue, which has been so important in expanding bilateral relations. The distinguished attendees here tonight represent all aspects of U.S.-China relationship, a relationship that expands and becomes more complex with each passing year. So maintaining that relationship requires a lot of hard work for many stakeholders, and it's not only easy, but it is certainly worth the effort. And for that, we salute the representatives of both governments here this evening. So Vice Premier Wang, State Councilor Yang, Secretary Vilsack, Secretary Pritzker, to you and the hard-working officials that support you, and on behalf of everyone here this evening, allow us to honor you and the U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue with a toast. And I'm going to ask him to bring my glass up. Thank you. You have to have a glass in your hand to toast, I understand. To healthy, mutually beneficial U.S.-China relations, Ganbei. I am very glad to see the enthusiasm with which that was done. And I am extremely delighted to have the opportunity this evening to introduce our new Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker. We are all pleased to have a new secretary in place, especially one with such a strong business background. Secretary Pritzker will play a key role in leading commercial diplomacy with China and with many other important markets around the globe. And although new to President Obama's cabinet, she is not a newcomer to China. Her business experience includes investments there and a great appreciation for the growth potential and the operating issues that matter so much to many of us here this evening. Secretary Pritzker hit the ground running since her confirmation just 2 weeks ago, and she was a participant in the strategic and economic dialogue these past 2 days. And she will be one of the co-leads for the U.S. government at the annual U.S.-China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade discussions later this year. So please join me in welcoming Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker.
Thank you, Ellen, and thanks to the U.S.-China Business Council and the National Committee for U.S.-China Relations for the work that you have done to build bridges for our two nations. It's a pleasure to be with so many distinguished guests from the United States and from China. I enjoyed the candid and constructive discussions that we concluded as part of the strategic and economic dialogue. I believe that we set a positive tone for bilateral engagement as President Xi and President Obama begin their new administrations. This was one of my, as Ellen said, one of my first major activities as Commerce Secretary, and I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to begin developing personal relationships with distinguished members of the Chinese delegation, including Vice Premier Wang and Ministers Gao, Liu, and Wan. In recent years, the U.S.-China relationship has contributed much to global economic growth. This relationship will only grow stronger and more important in the years ahead. Therefore, we have an important responsibility to carefully manage and strengthen our commercial and economic ties. I was a business leader for 27 years until just 2 weeks ago, in fact. And that experience has given me a certain perspective. I believe that we must focus on direct, pragmatic, goal-oriented, and mutually beneficial outcomes. We must build on the positive outcomes that we achieve today in important areas, such as simplifying foreign investment approvals, improving transparency, and strengthening protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights. In addition, we have to be clear and forthcoming in raising concerns that we learn from our business communities, as we both did today at the CEO Roundtable, comprised of government and business leaders from both of our countries. Overall, we want to send a powerful signal to the world of enhanced cooperation between our two nations as we uncover and advance common interests. And to do that, we must build trust and be able to speak frankly to each other, which we have done this week. If we continue on this path of dialogue and cooperation, we can unleash our full potential and achieve our shared vision of more trade, more investment, and more prosperity for people in both of our nations. As Commerce Secretary, I'm committed to that approach. We must move forward with the progress we made these past 2 days, as well as the progress that we're making through the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade, which I look forward to co-chairing on the U.S. side with Ambassador Froman later this year. In addition, I am committed to working and hearing from business leaders in both countries, including those who are here today. It is business leaders who often provide the most valuable ideas and suggestions for strengthening our ties. The economic foundation of our bilateral relationship will continue to grow if we nourish free and fair trade, governed by transparent laws and regulation. As China renews its commitment to economic reform, the United States looks forward to great expectations to achievements for the mutual benefit of our economies, enterprises, and workers. So before I close, I'd like to add a few words about a project here in Washington, D.C. that I know many people in this room care deeply about. I'm delighted that plans are moving forward to complete the China Garden in the U.S. National Arboretum. The garden will be a symbol of friendship and goodwill between the people of the United States and China. And I understand Secretary Vilsack plans to make additional comments about the China Garden later this evening, so I won't steal his thunder. But again, please allow me to express my respect and deep admiration for the strong and wise leadership of Vice Premier Wang, Ministers Gao, Liu, and Wan, and the professionalism and dedication of the Chinese delegation, which have helped to ensure the success of our meetings. So thank you very much. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Secretary Pritzker, and it is a great pleasure to have her in the position so quickly, and we look forward to the contributions that will be made. And it is now my pleasure to introduce one of the two leaders of China's delegation, Vice Premier Wang Yang. Vice Premier Wang chaired the economic side of the Strategic and Economic Dialogue for China opposite Treasury Secretary Jack Lew. And prior to his current post, Vice Premier Wang was Party Secretary for Guangdong Province, where many companies, like mine in this room, have operations. And we've all come to know him through his work there and appreciate his vision and his support. In his new role, he leads China's foreign investment, trade, and agricultural policies. He will no doubt come to know many of the foreign companies here this evening and many more that aren't represented here. And he will seek to support and participate in China's economic transformation. So I did have the opportunity to meet with Vice Premier Wang this morning in this small group. And in that discussion, I observed how thoughtful he was on issues that foreign companies face with their business operations in China. He was actively jumped into the conversation on very specific issues. And to me, that gives me a great positive feeling and hope for future progress. We at the U.S.-China Business Council look forward to working with him in his new role as we seek to further expand a healthy economic and commercial relationship. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Vice Premier Wang Yang.
Chairman Coleman, Chairman Hills, Secretary Pritzker, Secretary Vilsack, and also a lot of names I think I should address today, but since the list is so long, I will just skip all the names. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to attend this banquet. I see many heavyweight figures in the audience who have been dedicated to China-US friendship. Your presence gives us greater confidence in the success of China-US cooperation. I'm sure that the wine served this evening will taste better than what Secretary Lew provided for us, because it is the taxpayers who pay for it, while he is the one who spends taxpayers' money. So I would suggest that in the future, when we should have a dinner like this before going into the dialogue, so that our dialogue can better serve the taxpayers. Well, your applause shows that, it's like an opinion poll. It shows that you endorse my idea, but it's not my decision. It is the decision of the U.S. government whether there will be a change of agenda in the future. All of you present today have long been committed to China-U.S. friendship and contributed significantly to the practical cooperation between the two countries. On behalf of the Chinese government and people, I wish to express thanks and pay tribute to you all. It has been 10 years since my last visit to the United States. Today, 10 years later, I found that our relations have become closer. In past visits, what was high on my mind was how to find the common ground. Well, this time, during this round of dialogue, I suddenly come to realize it may also be necessary for us to keep our differences. China and the United States are two very different countries. We are different in national conditions, stage of development, social system, and cultural heritage. Yet it is differences that make our world a distinctive and a colorful place. That applies to Mother Nature, the human society, and social system as well. The United States would not be the United States if it only has Manhattan but not Las Vegas. Our world wouldn't be the same if there is just Washington, D.C., but not Beijing. And if we only have winter, not summer, only women, not men in the world, how boring would it be? Of course, because of differences, there's a need for us to make rules. And to formulate and observe rules, we need to have dialogue, exchange, and a consultation. The economic dialogue is a dialogue conducted under the precondition and the premises of a market economy. The United States has developed market economy for over 200 years, while China only launched its reform and opening up some 30 years ago, and it has been only 20 plus years since we introduced the market economy. Our market economy is not yet a full-fledged one. So in a certain sense, in developing market economy, you are the teacher and we are the student. It is like in a boxing match. China and the United States are not yet in the same weight class. I know that President Obama is a good basketball player, but if we ask him to play against LeBron James, it certainly wouldn't be fair. People hope that China will open its market wider, enhance intellectual property protection, and reform state-owned enterprises. Well, to be frank and to be honest, these are what we are doing in China, but it is impossible to get the job done overnight. In this globalized world, China, a big country with 1.3 billion people, still needs time to bring its national conditions in line with international rules and find a model that suits itself. Well, today, General Scowcroft is also present at the dinner. 2 weeks ago, when he visited China, I had a meeting with him. I asked him if he had anticipated what China would be like today when he was on his secret visit to China in 1972. He said absolutely not. And this is the exact word he told me during our last meeting. A review of past twists and turns in our economic and trade relations will help us a lot in keeping the relations on the right track in the future. The economic dialogue seeks to solve the problems in our economic cooperation. Past experience shows that the most important principle we should follow is not to politicize economic issues. Business is business, and politics is politics. For example, just take my example. I am a member of the Communist Party, but like you, when I go back home, I also need to listen to my wife and do what she asks me to do. Because work and life are two separate matters, after all. A few people have been trying to politicize economic issues, and what they are doing has actually taken hostage both China and the United States. If the leaders do not keep a clear head, China and the United States could easily fall into the Thucydides trap. What we should jointly pursue is to do business together while following our respective path and seek win-win cooperation based on mutual respect while avoiding conflict and confrontation. Harmony without uniformity and harmonious coexistence should be the rule followed by all in the world. The SNED has come to a fruitful conclusion. I am sure that you are all very interested in what outcomes we have achieved in the SNED. So I want to give you a summary of this round of dialogue with 4 Chinese common sayings. First, getting things started is always difficult. Fortunately, we have got off to a good start. We have reached nearly 90 outcomes in the economic dialogue. Well, I cannot. I won't give you a full detail of all the outcomes. Otherwise, we'll have to have this dinner going on for hours, and they will turn the dinner into a breakfast. Well, secondly, a good beginning means half the success. In addition to the outcomes recorded in the outcome list, there is another intangible benefit of this dialogue. That is, the teams of the two countries have become knowing each other and laid a good foundation for our future cooperation, which is even more important than the specific results. My relationship with Jacob Liu is now at the first stage. We have become friends. Well, the next stage is to become pals. Then in the third stage, we should become sworn friends. Well, thirdly, the third Chinese common saying is that he who is impatient cannot eat hot tofu. Maybe some Americans don't get the meaning of this saying. Maybe you do not know what I'm talking about. Well, if that is the case, my suggestion is for you to go to a Chinese restaurant at Chinatown or in China and try this dish, hot tofu. The fourth Chinese common saying is that it's better to move ahead slowly than just to stand still. Many people in China and the United States, including many of you, have heard about the story of hare and tortoise in Aesop's fable. I think for China-US relations, especially economic cooperation, the most important thing is for us to make constant progress. Well, although we may not be able to reach the speed of a hare and to grow our relation by leaps and bounds, but at least we can be a diligent tortoise. So I use these four sayings to report to all of you who care for the China-US economic dialogue about what we have achieved in this round of SNED. In these past 2 days, I've discussed a lot of differences between China and the United States with my counterpart. But tonight, standing here, I feel that all of you, both Chinese Americans, share one thing in common, and that is we all want to have a good dinner. So bon appetit. Thank you.
You know, before the dinner, Vice Premier Wang asked me how I was able to get so many people to come here tonight. And I said, well, when you have a good speaker, it's easy. So thank you very much, Vice Premier, for your remarks. Many of us have met you before, but it's a real pleasure to be able to meet you in this role and to hear your comments this evening. And I'd like to close by highlighting an important point from your opinion piece. Vice Premier Wang wrote an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal on Monday. I'm sure many of you have read it. In that, he noted that the great potential for the U.S.-China economic and commercial relationship, and you said the way to realize that potential and overcome the challenge is to enhance communication, deepen mutual understanding, and promote mutual trust. And maybe that third stage with Secretary Liu, that mutual trust, is one that will come hopefully more quickly than the tortoise, maybe not as fast as the hare. And I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiment there. I think this week's visit is an excellent start. Thank you all again for being here. And now it's time for dinner, and we will pick up the second half of the program shortly. Thank you.
Wait.
Ladies
Everybody
and gentlemen,
sit down, please.
ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Thank you.
Hey, I like that voice above me. That was better than me. 我是美中关系全国委员会的欧伦斯。
I'm Orlins of the U.S.-China National Committee on U.S.-China Relations.
Committee on U.S.-China Relations, and I have very light duty tonight. First is just to thank you all for coming and demonstrating your support for constructive U.S.-China relations. I applaud all of you for being here. And second is I want to introduce to you the chairman, the chairwoman of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, the former United States Trade Representative, Ambassador Carla Hills. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, one and all. I'm delighted to see this room full. I hope you enjoyed your dinner tonight and your dinner conversation. As chair of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, let me say it is a great pleasure for the National Committee to co-host this dinner with the U.S.-China Business Council and in collaboration with the other fine organizations and corporate sponsors listed in your program, and we warmly thank every single one of you. For more than 4 decades, the National Committee has dedicated itself to building strategic ties between the United States and China. And our efforts have never been more important than they are today. The fact is that we have done so much together, yet we have so much more to do. And that fact has been well recognized by our next speaker, the Honorable Tom Vilsack. I have a few words to say about the Secretary. He is our nation's 30th Secretary of Agriculture, who has been active in building partnerships with officials in China since his appointment as Secretary in 2008. And prior to becoming Secretary, he served 2 terms as Governor of Iowa. Iowa has such charm. You'll hear more about it tonight. And while he was governor, he chaired the Midwestern Governors Association and the Governors Biotechnology Partnership. And as a recognized leader from an agricultural state, he brought to his current position a keen understanding of science and technology that can advance farm productivity and contribute to food safety. He became chair of the first ever White House Rural Council. As Secretary of Agriculture, he's traveled to China on a number of occasions to meet with key leaders in agriculture, including the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Science and Technology, seeking to advance the bilateral collaboration in areas such as food security and sustainable agriculture. When then Vice President Xi visited Iowa last year, it was Secretary Vilsack who hosted him and Minister Han, China's Minister of Agriculture, at the first ever U.S.-China Agricultural Symposium, which has become an annual event. And it was there that the 2 agricultural ministers signed a plan of strategic cooperation that will guide our 2 countries' agricultural relationship for the next 5 years. His efforts to strengthen the U.S. trade relations and agriculture with China have been well recognized. Last year, Secretary Vilsack was awarded the Public Service Award by the World Food Prize. please join me in welcoming the Secretary of Agriculture, the Honorable Tom Vilsack, to the podium. Welcome.
Very much. Well, Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And it certainly is an honor to be here this evening. I want to extend my warmest greetings to the Vice Premier. We are pleased that you're here today, and we are pleased that you have had a strong and fruitful dialogue and discussion. I can't say to the Vice Premier that the swordfish was from Iowa, and the beef was probably not from Iowa. But the next time you come, perhaps we can have some pork from Iowa. Ladies and gentlemen, this relationship that we have in agriculture with the Chinese is extraordinarily important. China is our #1 trading partner. Over the last several years, that relationship has grown stronger and deeper. I appreciate the Ambassador referencing our Ag Symposium. It indeed is a recognition of the importance of the relationship and the need for our two great countries to understand the challenge that we both face, which is as the world population continues to grow, China and the United States will be challenged to meet global food demands. It's not an easy task. Over the course of the next 40 years, we will have to increase agricultural production by 70%. To give you a sense of how steep that is, it will require as much innovation in the next 40 years as we have enjoyed in agriculture in the last 10,000 years. It requires two great countries to work together to promote the science of agriculture. Recently, we have been working with the Chinese to encourage participation and adoption of biotechnology. The capacity of science to enable us to continue to grow more, even though the climate can sometimes challenge our efforts, and even though water resources become scarce. Last year, for example, in this great country of ours, we suffered a serious drought, something the Chinese know a great deal about as well. But notwithstanding that drought, we enjoyed the 5th largest corn crop we've ever produced in this country because of science. That's why it's going to be important for our two great countries to continue working together, and why I'm excited about the pilot project that we've announced to work together to better synchronize our regulatory processes so that we can get science into the field more quickly. Another opportunity that we have to build this relationship is what Secretary Pritzker referred to earlier, which is the China Garden Project. You have at your tables a small flyer about this great project. It gives you a sense of the scope of it and the challenge we face in helping to build it. We have a great partner who is leading this effort, who I asked to undertake this responsibility. And I'd like Bob Stallman, who is the President of the American Farm Bureau, just to stand up for just a second to be recognized. And I'd like Madam Young also to stand up and be recognized for her vision, because this is her idea. These two great leaders understand the power of this garden. Not only will it attract people to the nation's capital and the wonderful arboretum that we have, but it will be a living symbol of the strengthened relationship between our two countries. And it will be a constant reminder to all of us about the importance of continuing to build on that relationship. I look forward to traveling to China again to seeing my good friend Minister Han, to continue to be engaged in fruitful conversation, to build that lasting and deep trust that's been referred to several times tonight. I must say that I take my approach, and I believe we take our approach, by those who have gone before us. And while one great general has been referenced tonight, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize another American patriot, Secretary/General Colin Powell. Secretary, thank you for being here. So, Mr. Vice Premier, I'm excited to continue building our friendship and relationship after meeting with you tonight. And I look forward to future efforts to break down barriers, to develop the cooperative spirit that will be required. Our two great countries are up to the great challenge of feeding this ever-increasing world population and leading the rest of the world in agricultural science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We are so glad you're in the position that you are in with the knowledge that you bring to your responsibilities. And it is quite apparent that the vital interests of China and the United States are interlinked in so many ways, whether we're talking about the China Gardens, food security, nuclear proliferation, environmental challenges, pandemics, and I could go on and on. And these issues cannot be solved by either of us alone, nor can they be solved without both of us, by others. This fifth strategic and economic dialogue has brought together a very distinguished group of officials with a wide range of responsibilities and experiences, many of whom have been recently appointed to their current positions. Experience shows that broadening and deepening our relationships, public and private, we are most likely that way to find lasting and mutually agreed solutions to critical issues, allowing us to convert our challenges into real opportunities. Our next speaker from China is living proof that relationships matter. In July of 1977, the National Committee hosted a delegation from the Chinese People's Institute on Foreign Affairs that visited, and we arranged to have this delegation visit 10 cities across America. The young interpreter for that delegation was none other than Yang Chichur, then on his first visit to the United States. Exactly 36 years ago this evening, State Councilor Yang and his delegation was having dinner with the then governor of Iowa, Robert Ray, and his wife, where Yang Chichur did what he has been doing so well for nearly 4 decades, educating his fellow Chinese about America and Americans, and educating Americans about China and Chinese. In nearly 40 years following that dinner in Iowa, he spent more than a decade in Washington, D.C., in increasingly influential positions at the Chinese embassy, culminating with his appointment in 2001 as China's ambassador to the United States. In 2005, he returned home to serve as China's foreign minister. And on March 16th this year, he became state counselor responsible for international affairs. Please join me in welcoming a very old friend, State Councilor, the Honorable Yang Chichur, to this podium.
Thank you, Ambassador Carla Hughes, for your very warm remarks of introduction. Well, to come to the Washington, D.C., the best reward for me is to attend tonight's dinner and to see so many old friends and new friends. And it gives me a great pleasure. Secretary Pritzker, Secretary Vilsack, my dear colleague, Vice Premier Wang Yang, Chair Alan Coleman, Chair Carla Hughes, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. The fifth round of the China-US Strategic and Economic Dialogues, as Vice Premier Wang mentioned, has achieved good results, and it has completed the mission entrusted by our two presidents, which is an important mission. And we have taken a solid step toward the goal of creating a new model of major country relationship. Over a month ago, our two presidents held a no-tie meeting at Annenberg Estate, Sunnylands, California. They reached important agreement on creating a new model of major country relationship based on mutual respect and win-win cooperation. This meeting has charted the strategic course and drawn up the blueprint for growing China-US relations and opened a new chapter in Trans-Pacific cooperation. That was a strategic, constructive, and historic meeting. As you know, in December 1978, the Communist Party of China decided to launch a reform and opening up program at the third plenary session of its 11th Central Committee, which represented an opportunity to boost the growth of China-US relations. China's decision of reform and opening up and establishment of diplomatic ties between China and the United States have become two major global events since the 1970s. In the 3 decades and more since then, both China's reform and opening up endeavor and China-US relations have come a long way. The first decade of China-US relations saw China open itself to the world and to the United States. Since then, China has been developing rapidly its relations with the rest of the world, and China-US cooperation also began to get off ground in many areas and has been growing from strength to strength. We have been cooperating in the field of trade, businesses, as well as cultural programs. This has become a torrent that has bound our two great nations closely together. In the second decade of China-US relations, inspired by Mr. Deng Xiaoping's remarks during his tour of southern China in 1992, China went further on the path of reform and opening up. China-US trade and people-to-people exchanges both grew rapidly. Despite some twists and turns, China-US relations moved forward, becoming an irreversible trend of the times. With the advent of the 21st century, China-US relations entered its third decade of strong growth. China's accession to the WTO in 2001 marked its full integration in the global economy. China-US cooperation expanded, and the interests of the two countries became more closely intertwined. China-US relations went well beyond the bilateral context and increasingly acquired global and strategic importance. Indeed, they have become one of the most important bilateral ties in today's world. Today, China-US relations have entered its fourth decade of mature growth. Our two countries, the world's two largest economies, have formed a community of inseparable shared interests, from promoting economic and social development at home to promoting global economic recovery, from resolving international and regional hotspot issues to tackling global challenges. China and the United States enjoy broad common interests and have huge space of cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the current international and regional situation undergoing profound and complex changes. Globalization, IT application have accelerated. The mankind is facing both unprecedented opportunities and numerous challenges, which call for joint response by all countries. With China being the largest developing country and the United States being the largest developed country, we must and we should abandon the outdated zero-sum game mentality and create a new model of win-win cooperation between major countries. The new model of major country relations envisioned by our presidents at Annenberg Estate is the only right choice for China and the United States. It is not only in the interest of our two countries and peoples, but also conducive to peace, stability, and prosperity of the world. To build such relations is a great cause, unknown in history, a cause that will inspire the future generations. It requires wisdom, vision, and actions, and more importantly, political resolve on both sides. First, we should view each other's development with an open mind and in an inclusive and positive light. We should embrace dialogue, cooperation, and partnership, and oppose confrontation, conflict, and rivalry. We need to increase high-level exchanges of visits, enhance mutual understanding and trust through face-to-face contact between the leaders of our two countries. We should make full use of the over 90 bilateral governmental dialogue and consultation mechanisms such as the SNED, maintain close consultation and coordination, and bring our bilateral relations to a new and higher level. Second, we should seize new opportunities presented by each other's development and strive to make new progress in cooperation. The Chinese people are now working to realize the Chinese dream, which is a great renewal of the Chinese nation, and the two centenary goals. The Chinese government is ensuring steady growth, adjusting economic structure, and improving people's well-being. This will offer more opportunities for China-US cooperation. We should fully leverage each other's strength, enhance pragmatic cooperation in two-way investment, energy, environmental protection, infrastructure, urbanization, and other fields, and at subnational level, and nurture new growth areas and deepen our shared interests. We should boost cultural and people-to-people exchanges. The two sides are working on a China Garden project in the Washington, D.C., which will be another symbol of China-US friendship in the new era. Vice Premier Wang Yang and I are both glad to know that there are both secretaries attending tonight's dinner mentioned that they will give full support to the development of the China Garden. And tonight, the Vice Chairperson of the Committee of Population, Resources and Environment of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the Executive Director of the Chinese side for the China Garden, Madam Zhang Zehui, is here. Let me acknowledge her as she has made important contribution to this project. We should also deepen coordination and collaboration on global issues such as climate change, cyber, food and energy security, and regional hotspot issues such as the Korean nuclear issue, the Iranian nuclear issue, and Syria, and keep expanding the foundation of our shared interests. Third, we should view differences between our two countries in proper perspective and tackle disagreement in an appropriate manner. Given differences in history, culture, value, and the social system, it is natural that our two countries have differences on some issues. Vice Premier Wang Yang already mentioned that the world that we live today is a splendid and colorful one. Therefore, we should act in the spirit of seeking common ground while shelving differences. Respect the right of the two peoples to independently choose social system and development path, fully accommodate each other's core interests and major concerns, explore new and constructive ways of managing differences, and endeavor to turn difficulties and hot issues into areas of cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as a Chinese saying goes, a single thread does not make a cord, nor a single tree makes a forest. To create a new model of major country relationship between China and the United States calls for joint efforts and broad support from all sectors of the two countries. The ping-pong diplomacy 42 years ago enabled a tiny ball to move the globe. Today, friendly exchanges among various social sectors between our two countries are flourishing. I hope and I believe that the people of all sectors from both sides will work together to sustain the positive momentum of China-US friendship and carry it forward. And we should get more people involved in creating a new model of major country relationship and make them benefit from this endeavor, and thus provide an inexhaustible source of power driving the growth of China-US relations. Ambassador Carla Hales just now mentioned my first trip to the United States. At that time, I was 27 years old. I can remember my age very clearly because I was born in the year 1950 and I came to the United States first in 1977. I think I have always enjoyed a good and close relationship with the U.S.-China Business Council and National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. Indeed, it is fair to say that the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations was the teacher which gave me the first inspiration and led me to understanding the United States, because that time I was only a very young interpreter, and my visit to 30 cities of 10 U.S. states gave me an opportunity to contact the senior U.S. officials as well as leading business figures as a very junior interpreter. And I was also glad that the two places I visited in 1977, the Iowa and the city of Chicago, are the exact origin of the two secretaries seated tonight. I was deeply and pleasantly impressed by my visit to Iowa. We visited the John Deere factory and we saw its tractors. And that time I thought that if China also had such machineries to help us to harvest, that would be very good. And now we are glad to see that trade between China and the United States has been growing. And we thank Secretary Vilsack for his contribution to the relationship between his state and China, as well as the cooperation in the agriculture sector between his state and China, and between the U.S. and China as a whole. I also visited the Great Lake, the Lake of Chicago, and at the time I thought I was standing along the sea and the ocean, and I was also impressed deeply by the buildings of Chicago. And later on, I know that in front of the New Yorkers, we should not talk about the buildings of Chicago. I'm glad to see Secretary Pritzker today, and I'm confident that she will make important contribution to the growth of China-U.S. relations. U.S.-China Business Council, I remember that once in the Mayflower Hotel, it held a reception hosted the former President Nixon, who was the pioneer for China-U.S. relations. And I was deeply impressed by his speech back then. I was also impressed enormously by the enormous contribution made by U.S.-China Business Council for the growth of China-U.S. relations. Although I have made many visits to Washington, D.C., every time I felt they were pleasant trips because I have many beautiful memories here and good friends here. And when I went to White House with Vice Premier Wang Yang this afternoon, I passed across the Mayflower Hotel and I gazed at it because the China Liaison Office in the United States, before it had its permanent place, was headquartered in the Mayflower Hotel. And I met many of my American friends there at the hotel, and they have offered me a lot of assistance. Whether I was a second secretary or a minister in the embassy or an ambassador in the embassies, therefore, I would like to acknowledge and express my tribute to General Scowcroft, who was also one of the pioneers for the China-U.S. relations. At the same time, the general has also taught me a lot. And probably he can still do more push-ups than I can do now. I also met with former Secretary of Defense Cohen. I've also been to the balcony of the 8th floor of the State Department. I was there in the past, and this time, although Secretary Kerry came here to co-chair this dialogue despite the fact that his wife was not in good health, and the first thing that he did was to lead me to the 8th floor balcony, and which reminded me of the beautiful memories as well as my exchanges with my American friends. So I definitely need to mention former Secretary of State Colin Powell, because when he was served as the Secretary of State, I had the most opportunities of going to the 8th floor balcony because he always hosted the ambassadors and the wives of ambassadors of other countries in the United States to attend all kinds of receptions and the dinners held in the State Department. He himself also contributed greatly to China-U.S. relations. As the Vice Premier mentioned, it is not possible to list all the names of all my friends here, but still, I want to say here that thanks to the leadership of the Vice Premier, our team and the U.S. team has had very close cooperation and collaboration. This strategic and economic dialogues have helped to boost the relationship between two countries and have made good progress. Well, sorry for taking so much time, which has exceeded the arrangements of the host, and I would like to say sorry. And in particular, I would like to say thanks to James Barris. I also wish to say thanks to Mr. John Frisbee and Mr. Stephen Orlins. Thank you all. Thank you.
We thank you for those wonderful remarks, and your remembrance of being in the United States warms our hearts. I think that the wonderful speeches today, this evening, and from our two secretaries, Secretary Vilsack and Secretary Pritzker, the Vice Premier Wang, State Councilor Yang, and your distinguished delegation, we were impressed with it, give credence to the notion and the wisdom of having a strategic economic dialogue. So I know everyone in the room applauds the fact that you are here, encourages you to continue, and to build this partnership even stronger in the days ahead. And I would like to thank everyone in the audience for being here tonight, and I'd also like to ask one small favor, and that is stay seated, talking to your table mates, and let our Chinese visitors rise and depart as one unit so that they are not lost in our crowd. So just stay and talk for 3 minutes, and I thank you one and all.